Coming up in Primetime Lawmakers, the tax reform plan passes the Senate, signaling final passage of the long-awaited measure a mere 2 days after clearing the House. The new law cuts some income taxes, creates a tax on internet purchases, and repeals the tax companies pay on energy. The House takes a major step towards fixing Georgia's prison problem as it passes criminal justice reform. Supporters say the bill will reduce criminal recidivism and use an alternate punishment method for nonviolent drug offenders. Georgians pay millions of dollars every year in fees for things like the Solid Waste Disposal Fund, but much of that money doesn't go to the named funds. That may change as the Senate passes a bill to direct those fees to their designated funds, but only if the state's rainy day fund is at a certain threshold. A firearms bill gets amended in committee to allow 18 to 21-year-olds who are former military to be licensed to carry weapons if they pass a training course. Currently, only those over the age of 21 can be licensed. And it's the end of the legislative week. There aren't many days left. Time for political commentary from Buddy Darden, former state legislator and congressman, now senior counsel in McKenna, Long and Aldridge, and Bill Crane, political analyst with CSI Crane. Those guys will help put everything into perspective. For Thursday, March 22nd, 2012, the 37th legislative day at the Georgia General Assembly, this is Primetime Lawmakers. Good evening and welcome to Primetime Lawmakers, GPB's nightly coverage of the Georgia General Assembly. I'm Scott Slade. Let's go out to the Capitol now where Sasha Horn reports the Senate gives final passage to tax reform.
Scott, to some it might seem like that tax reform bill just swept through both chambers. It was just introduced on Monday and it's already on its way to the governor's desk. But Governor Nathan Deal says that's because it's been in the works for quite some time.
We've been working on this package before I became governor.
And after more than 2 years of work, the Senate Thursday voted unanimously to pass the tax reform package. It cleared the House on Tuesday. At a news conference Thursday, Governor Nathan Deal says it's the right thing to do for the state.
We believe that this package is good news for individuals, it is good news for businesses, and we believe it is overall good news for the state of Georgia.
The tax plan includes a measure that removes the sales tax manufacturers pay on energy.
It makes our state more competitive and makes it a place that we can grow jobs for our citizens.
Georgians ask us to do one thing. Over and over and over they ask for jobs, for jobs, for jobs. Today, the Georgia General Assembly has delivered.
Now that package is expected to reduce taxes in Georgia by $48.8 million overall during the next fiscal year. But what about all that revenue they're seemingly losing? To offset the tax cuts, the bill would raise additional tax revenue by imposing a new title fee on purchases of motor vehicles. It would also cap the income tax exclusion on non-work income earned by Georgia seniors. Another way they'll make up those differences is the e-fairness provisions, which would assess a sales tax to online purchases from out-of-state vendors with affiliate businesses here in Georgia. And lawmakers in the Senate passed what some are calling a watered-down version of the fees bill. You might remember the original intent of that bill was to ensure fees collected across the state, for example, that tire disposal fee, actually went into the Solid Waste Trust Fund. Under current law, it could go into the general fund, which means it could end up funding something completely unrelated.
The Senate Appropriations Committee, however, changed the bill, adding a clause that would create a 7% trigger before the funds began to redirect from the general fund, much to the dismay of Senate Democrats, who tried unsuccessfully to restore the bill to its original intent.
Wouldn't it be more appropriate to properly designate what our taxes are supposed to be for than have a trust fund set up for one purpose and then take that money and put it somewhere else?
Again, Senator, I think it's more important that we put the funds towards what we consider important. I would think education, public safety is a little bit more important than picking up a tire.
Now the bill passed the Senate, but changes were made in committee, so it now goes back to the House for another vote. Now here's a story that we've been following since the beginning, a measure that would allow brew pubs to at least double the amount of beer they can produce. It passed the House last month and easily passed the Senate today. Lawmakers say the increase will help create more jobs in Georgia. It's now up to the governor to sign it into law. And the Senate bill that would require welfare applicants to submit to drug testings has gained national attention. Some legal analysts say the bill will most certainly be challenged in court. And today, members of the Democratic caucus say they think the bill is unconstitutional.
The Fourth Amendment to the United States Constitution provides that the right of all people The rights of all people are protected against unreasonable searches and seizures. The Supreme Court has held that drug testing constitutes a search within the meaning of the Fourth Amendment.
The authors of the bill are saying that this is designed to save the state money. But the reality is that most TANF benefits, 99%, over 99% actually, of the benefit, the money comes from the federal government. Less than 1% comes from the state. As such, I'm not sure what kind of dollars they're talking about saving. So you have to keep asking yourself, what is this really about?
Now, the bill cleared a House committee on Wednesday, and with just 3 days left, it's expected the Senate will vote on it next week. Scott?
All right, thanks very much, Sasha. A little levity and a fanfare one in the House today. Longtime WSB TV anchor Monica Pearson was honored by the Chamber for her decades of service to Atlanta's TV viewers. Monica will be retiring from WSB TV this year and going on to pursue a master's degree in journalism from the University of Georgia. All of us here at GPB would like to add our thanks and well wishes to Monica Pearson, who invented the whole idea of public service by broadcasters. A note about the legislative schedule. House leadership announced the dates for the final 3 days of the session. Next week, the General Assembly will meet for Day 38 on Monday, Day 39 on Tuesday, and then following a short break, Day 40 on Thursday. The Constitution requires that the legislature meet no more than 40 days. That means Thursday is sine die, the final day of the session. For inquiring minds, sine die is Latin for without a day, used by the General Assembly to mean adjournment without a day set for reconvening. And there's your Latin lesson for today. This is public television, after all. Now back down to the Capitol to Sandra Parrish, who reports the House passes an extensive criminal justice reform measure aimed at fixing Georgia's prison population problem.
Scott, the bill passed overwhelmingly with only one vote in opposition. It's the culmination of a year-long study by a special commission looking at how to reduce the state's prison population.
Over the last 20 years, we've seen our prison population basically double. We've seen our corrections spending more than double. We're on an unsustainable path if we didn't do something with criminal justice reform. As a matter of fact, if we did nothing, we would have about $264 million in additional correction spending over the next 5 years just to keep up with the growth of nearly 5,000 beds.
The bill expands alternative sentencing programs such as DUI and drug courts for nonviolent offenders, such as those with drug convictions.
These nonviolent offenders go back, reoffend, go back into the system. And what are they really effectively doing? They're taking up bed space that we could otherwise use and should otherwise use for violent offenders.
It also raises the threshold for crimes involving theft.
So we took that threshold and moved it up to $1,500 for nearly all of the theft-related crimes, but not all of them. $1,500 brings us into line with our neighboring states. Some are a little lower, some are a little higher. $1,500 is pretty much right in the middle. There is one exception, however, and that is with shoplifting. With respect to our retail community, at their request, and to demonstrate our sensitivity, that we understand that if we go ahead and set the threshold high, the thieves are going to go right up to that line. That's not going to help our businesses, small businesses and big businesses. And so with respect to that, we went ahead and set the threshold at $1,500 for almost all theft crimes, with the exception of shoplifting, which we kept at $500.
Shortly after the measure passed, we got reaction from Governor Nathan Deal, who has championed the effort since taking office.
We did not get everything that the Criminal Justice Council recommended, but we got the majority of it, and I think this is a first step. We know that there are many things that we're going to have to do, but this is a huge step in the right direction. The first time that Georgia has taken a step of this magnitude in a very long time.
The bill now goes to the Senate with just 3 days left in the session to pass it. The State House passes a bill today to join an interstate compact to help children of military families better transition into schools due to frequent moves and deployment by their parents. Lawmakers say it will make the state more attractive when the Base Realignment and Closure Commission considers closing military installations.
How we treat our soldiers and our military people is vitally important. Now, we can cry all we want when the flag passes, or we can say how much we support our military, but when the rubber touches the road, love is as love does. If you love them, this is a green vote.
That measure passed the House 137 to 23. A bill to allow 18 to 21-year-olds to get a firearms carry permit passed out of the House Judiciary Non-Civil Committee today, but was amended to only include those who are members of the military.
I found out in the last year that there are jobs available in Georgia in the security industry, meaning private investigation, executive protection, and private security. Some of these firms would like to hire some of our returning military veterans, more specifically in our National Guard. A lot of these guys have been overseas, and even if they haven't, they've received a lot of training, just in basic military training, not only on handling weapons, but the decision on when to use deadly force. And especially those who have been serving in Iraq, Afghanistan. In fact, the 3rd of the 108th right now is in Kosovo doing security. That unit will be coming back in August, and many of those guys are 18, 19, 20 years old. But the experience they have is far beyond what most people that have a Georgia firearms license has today.
The bill now goes to the House Rules Committee to be placed on the calendar for next week. Scott?
Sandra, I want to go back to the criminal justice reform passed by the House, the massive sentencing reform package. Will any amendments be allowed? Will that slow it down in the Senate next week, or will it have the same sort of rules as tax reform had?
Yes, they had the same sort of rules. When they passed the legislation last year that created the commission that set up the bill for this year, it was put in there that there would be no amendments placed on. I think that's why it took so long for us to see it come up this session, is they wanted to craft it just the way they wanted it, knowing that it would not be able to be amended.
Okay, thanks. We'll watch for that to happen next week. Many thanks, Sandra. And now a reminder that there's much more video and information available on our website. Extended interviews, complete shows, and live House and Senate streams are available at gpb.org/lawmakers. Also, you can like Primetime Lawmakers on Facebook and keep up with the Capitol News even before we go to air. Online or off, Primetime Lawmakers is your source for all the news under the Gold Dome. As we bring the 12th week of the legislature to a close, we're heading into the final 3 days of the session. Sandra Parrish has the highlights from this week with our Week in Review.
This week under the Gold Dome, on Monday, the Senate passed the constitutional amendment that will allow voters to decide if the state should have the power to create charter schools, even if local school districts have already decided against them. Senator Gloria Butler cited concerns stemming from Florida's charter schools and the for-profit management companies that run them.
Just imagine this, that you can go to the Bahamas on a retreat if you're a principal, and you all can get together on Paradise Island and have cocktails and just have a good time. Well, that's what happened with the person that owns Academia. That's a management company in Florida that manages charter schools. And he had a reason to be happy and be cheering, because it's a $400 million business.
Senator Butler's amendment failed, but the constitutional amendment passed. Voters will have the final say in November. Also on Monday, the House Judiciary Non-Civil Committee passed a bill that would prohibit illegal immigrants from attending public colleges in Georgia. Senator Barry Loudermilk says the measure is necessary, but the Board of Regents disagrees.
It's in my belief that even if a student who is here illegally is attending one of our state colleges, universities, they are receiving a public benefit because, as you know, we go through the budget process, we budget a lot of money, the university systems, and not all that goes to tuitions.
I believe our current policy addresses the concern some of you have that the system should ensure that all undocumented students pay out-of-state tuition, that no Georgians should be denied a seat in the college if they were academically qualified because of an undocumented student, and that educating undocumented students would not cost Georgia taxpayers.
The bill passed and now sits in Senate rules before being placed on the full Senate calendar. Senator Don Balfour presented the governor's long-awaited tax reform plan Monday before a joint committee, and on Tuesday, the 35th legislative day, the House passed it with bipartisan support.
I had concerns last year, and I was proud this year to see HB 386 because we operate under a system that needs reform.
House Democrats got behind the measure, but the Tea Party patriots of Georgia did not.
And if this is an up or down vote, and that is the only choice that we have here, we say vote it down. We say as a coalition, vote this down. and then let's go back to the table and do something that's meaningful that we can all get behind.
The measure passed 155 to 9. There was much debate in the Senate on Tuesday over a bill that would allow wine tastings in stores that sell liquor.
This is a bill that is supported by the Gucci loafer-wearing liquor lobbyists who are looking down upon us. But an ounce of hypocrisy is worth a pound of ambition, because while they think it's okay for there to be liquor tastings in the state of Georgia, and while it's perfectly okay for a wine store to have wine tastings, or a wine and beer merchant to have wine tastings, this is simply about the ability to have wine tastings in a store that sells wine in addition to spirits.
That measure passed. Also on Tuesday, the Senate Appropriations Committee passed the 2013 budget. Chairman Senator Jack Hill says they are using all available resources to keep up with the fast-growing state.
The 2013 budget is all about growth and funding the growth of a growing state. And funding that growth took virtually all of the resources that we had available.
The $19.2 billion spending bill passed the full Senate on Wednesday, the 36th legislative day. Senator Hill says it's a delicate balancing act to keep current programs going and allocate for the future. Final passage Wednesday of a measure that will require victims of domestic violence to testify against their spouse. Senator Renee Underman says she has firsthand experience working with victims of domestic violence.
And I could cry, and they would cry. But less than 2 hours later, they would go back home. And I knew the situation they were going back home to.
The bill passed and awaits the governor's signature. Also on Wednesday, the House passed Chase's law, named for 16-year-old Chase Burnett, who died just a few weeks ago after his family says he smoked synthetic marijuana known as Spice before drowning in a hot tub. The bill strengthens the law prohibiting the sale of synthetic marijuana by adding all variations of the drug to the list of controlled substances. A few changes send the bill back to the Senate before it goes to the governor. And that's a look back at what happened this week under the Gold Dome.
And now primetime lawmakers Jackie Britton joins us live from the Capitol with other headlines from around the state. Good evening, Jackie.
Hi, Scott. Here are your state headlines for tonight. Some good news for Georgia. The jobless rate has dropped to a 3-year low. Labor Commissioner Mark Butler said this morning that the state's unemployment rate has declined for the 7th consecutive month to 9.1%. That's the lowest rate since March 2009. He also said that February's economic data is encouraging and that manufacturing is one of Georgia's growing sectors. And as fans gear up for baseball season, they'll be bidding farewell to a longtime staple of Atlanta baseball. Braves third baseman Chipper Jones announced today that this season will be his last. Jones, who turns 40 next month, has spent his entire 18-year career with the Braves. The ballplayer said due to a rash of injuries, retiring has been on his mind for several years. The Braves say he hopes to remain with the organization in another capacity. For more information on these and other stories, visit www.gpb.org/news. And that will do it for your state headlines tonight. Scott, back to you.
And I heard Chipper say he wanted to handle this during spring training, Jackie, because he didn't want a bunch of nagging questions every time the team went to the dugout or back to the locker room during the clubhouse during the season. He wanted to get it out of the way now. That's pretty classy.
Well, hey, I don't blame him.
Thanks a lot. We've got to take a short break on Primetime Lawmakers, but don't go anywhere. It's the end of the legislative week. Time to check in with Buddy Darden and Bill Crane, two legislative experts who know the ins and outs of the Capitol. You don't want to miss this. It's the fun part. We're going to be right back and talk it over. As you saw a few moments ago, work continues in the House and Senate even as we approach the end of the session, continuing with our end of the week festivities. And for invaluable insight, we welcome in our good friend Buddy Darden. Buddy's a former state legislator and U.S. Congressman. He's senior counsel to McKenna, Long and Aldridge. And Bill Crane, political analyst with CSI Crane. Guys, it's great to have you back. First of all, maybe some of your impressions on this 2012 session. We got a lot of big things done, a lot of fringe things still hanging around.
It's March Madness. This is our version of it right here, and it's winding down, and a lot's going on. More happening now the last week than's happened the entire session, hasn't it, Bill?
And it's a little bit more concise session. We've strung into April and almost into May in the last couple of years, and this getting in and out this tightly, I got to give them a little bit of applause for it.
All right, yeah, getting through by the end of March. And certainly legislators can't really money campaign or get campaign donations while
That's
they're in
right.
session.
Now, Tom Murphy used to have us out by St. Patrick's Day so he could go to Savannah for the big celebration down there. So I think this is a trend in the right direction to go ahead and get through.
And qualifying is just a month afterwards in April, so they'll all be back in. And this is an election year, so they've all got to run. So as you just said, the fundraising is very important too.
Final passage for this huge tax reform package that doesn't do everything the tax council headed by A.D. Frazier wanted to do, but it does a lot of things. Some thoughts on that, maybe how it came down, what it does.
53 pages. They rammed it through this week before anybody had a chance to read it, kind of like we used to do in Congress, and we were criticized quite a bit for that, and I think there's a lot of criticism, a lot of discussion going on. It may be the greatest thing that's ever come out of the Georgia legislature, but I really don't think it's had a chance to have a full and fair hearing. We'll just have to take the word of the governor and the speaker and the lieutenant governor that it's the right thing to do. I hope it is. I hope it succeeds.
The projections are a little soft, particularly on some questions where we're shifting revenue, like the end of the ad valorem tax, which I'm happy to see. I don't like paying a car tag tax. Nobody does. But that's a major source of revenue for local governments, right behind property taxes, which are getting hammered, and sales taxes. So you take that off the table and you're going to replace it with a one-time title transfer fee. I think 7% was the number, but nobody's got any idea what that will be. They say it's revenue neutral, and again, I think it levels the playing field to put internet taxes in place, and that's a good thing, but we won't know what that's really going to generate until a year from now.
Our county commissioners are upset about it
because
we know what that's going to create. We know what that'll generate, and especially in these large metro counties like Gwinnett, Cobb, Fulton, this is a lot of money. And right now,
it's cash
month by month, and they don't know what they're going to get or what we're going to receive or when it'll come in.
Local governments have already been hammered by the lower property values and not being able to collect as much real estate tax as they had. So this might not help. Are they going to get any kind of
The trend is moving control, basically, despite a lot of discussion about local control, centralizing. So whether it's charter schools or revenue or whether the state should be able to spend as it sees fit all these different fees and funds, it's centralizing power, not decentralizing. And I would point out that a lot of the discussion as they've gotten elected has been about sending power back to the local place.
I agree with Bill here. If you look at the Charter Schools Amendment, regardless of where you come down on the issue itself, it's more control to the state. If you look at the revenue bill that just passed, that's more control to the state. If you look at the criminal justice bill that just passed, more control to the state. And is this really what we want? Perhaps so, but I really don't think it's consistent with the rhetoric that these people got elected for.
Okay, final passage. So that's now law, and the governor has every intention of signing tax reform. So we'll watch the numbers as they roll by.
No question about it. In fact, I think he's probably the prime mover behind it.
Yes.
And he was the one out front at the news conference today.
The House has passed criminal justice reform, sentencing reform, if you like. It deals with everything from raising the threshold of felony theft to $1,500, unless it's shoplifting, and then it's $500, to changing the way the courts look at drug offenses. Bill, what are some complications here for this as it moves on to the Senate?
Well, the law enforcement community had some concerns about the number of changes. I think this bill's 800 pages, so it's one of the larger omnibus bills that's come through. They were also concerned that they want the judges to have more discretion, again, state control, on sentencing options, because right now a lot of that is prescribed in the statute. So the judge can do this much, but he doesn't have that flexibility. So both the Judicial Commission and the district attorneys and the sheriffs and the chiefs of police all wanted to see local discretion in those sentencing options, an alternative sentencing option for nonviolent, DUI, and other offenders.
We love this state, but regrettably, one of the things that we lead the nation in is the percentage of our people in population and
1 out of every 13
in prison,
in some type of control.
That's right. It seems like practically everybody is either in prison or on probation, and we need to do something about bringing those numbers down. It's incredibly expensive. You can send somebody to Harvard, I understand, cheaper than you can send them to prison.
$54 a day, I think, to lock up an adult in Georgia.
And when you add in the cost of administration of running the Department of Corrections and the Department of Probation, all that, it's about $61,000 an inmate per year.
And the legal liability that comes with it, that's an incredible amount of legal
Will
liability.
there be any noise over handling drug offenders in a different way? I'm not going to say decriminalizing, because that's not what it is.
Some of the law enforcement folks think that it is decriminalizing, in effect, minor possession. So yeah, you will see cases not made, and you will see people not do hard time. The question is, are these alternative programs as successful in keeping them becoming long, hard-term offenders? Because a lot of what happens with nonviolent offenders is they go to prison, they get in that hard bed, and they learn how to get criminal college.
That's right. And at the same time, we're coming up with this harebrained scheme to do drug tests on people who are receiving public assistance, and it seems like that we're going in one direction to try to put more people out there, now bringing them to prison, and now we're doing search and seizures on potential number of people, and you're going to put them in prison.
Yeah, I agree with Scott last year. I think some of these March Madness bills are about saying things to the GOP base to get them fired up for the fall, whether or not they pass them into law in the next 4 days or not.
Well, the benefits bill did pass committee. It's not benefits bill, drug testing, personal growth, that sort of thing to get state benefits. So it hasn't died yet, but it also hasn't had the big audience that it will get most likely.
Talked to a friend of mine who's a federal judge this week about some of these bills coming up. He says, well, it looks like the legislature is creating business for us over here in the federal court.
Fourth Amendment might very well come into play. All right, as far as the resolution is concerned for Congress to fix the guest worker visa program, it's just a resolution. They're asking for Congress to give us more workers here in Georgia fields.
Well, we've had problems with the HB1 visa and E-Verify for the last several years, and although the federal government has made some changes in the law and the state government has created a lot of law on the immigration front, the problems don't seem to get any better.
Well, when I was in Congress, we'd get these nice resolutions bound up from the Georgia legislature, and I was pleased to acknowledge them and thank them, but then we put them in the recycle file.
Okay. Firearms. Let's talk about this just a second. That's moving forward. This bid to push the carry permit age down to the age of 18 if you're a returning veteran and you can prove you've passed a safety course.
To me, that was a sensible compromise. I mean, my prospective son-in-law is a Marine, and he's had extensive firearm training, and I feel very comfortable if he were to get a carry permit, but some 18-year-old kid off the street.
That's right. There are not going to be many of these. In fact, they've got it so narrow now. And let's face it, how many people come back who are 18? They're going to be 19 or 20, even 25. So I really think now that they've done some sensible restrictions, because Georgia already has some of the most lenient gun laws in the entire country right now. So we need to be real careful about this.
In the little time we have left, they'll take not one, not two, but 3 full days for oral arguments next week in front of the U.S. Supreme Court over the Obama health care law. That's a lot of time.
And they haven't done that on any single issue in over a decade. So it's an impressive amount of time that they're committing to it, and that they announced in advance that they were going to give that much time up front.
And Georgia lawmakers are waiting on the outcome of that, obviously.
I can't think of anything more boring than arguments before the Supreme Court on the same issue for more than 3 days. I realize they've set up categories, but I think the Supreme Court really is probably wasting its time, and they ought to spend their time studying the issue and having their clerks brief these cases and try to find out what the answer is rather than just hearing the lawyers drone on, because I think there's going to be a whole lot of self-serving declarations there.
I expect there'll be a lot of campaign commercials cut out of some of this discussion, even though you can't have cameras in the Supreme Court, some of the things that are said there. And it's going to be one of the overriding issues of the presidential election. So I think part of the reason the court wanted to do it was to give it a thorough vetting and to be able to say
I support cameras in the courtroom, but this is one time I don't think we need them.
They'll release audio at the end of every day. We'll listen for that. Thanks, guys. See you soon, okay? Next week, Sine Die. Next week on Lawmakers, the home stretch, the final weekend of the session with the day 40. Sine Die set for Thursday. Monday, we'll be talking about the tax reform bill that received final passage today with Mercer University economist Roger Tutterow, who served on the Special Counsel on Tax Reform and Fairness that made a number of those recommendations. Catch us on Primetime Lawmakers next week for complete coverage of the final days of the session and all the latest news from the Capitol. And Lawmakers returns Monday, March 26th. Live coverage of every day's sessions available on our website, gpb.org/lawmakers. While you're there, check out our extended interviews and other videos. Legislative coverage 24/7 at gpb.org/lawmakers. And be sure and like us on Facebook, too. If you missed any part of this broadcast, catch the repeat tomorrow morning at 5:30 right here. Have a great night.
This is a GPB original production.